This is VR2 Han at Simply Han Tarot, just talking about our tarot practice. For me, there are three sort of pillars of what I do with tarot. I have a pretty extensive card of the year practice. I use tarot on a regular basis for self-love and self-care, and also on a regular basis for supporting my creativity. But there are other things I do to help keep my practice fresh as well. I have a little mini collection, a deck edit I take upstairs every week to my work desk. So I've got like a little section of my wider collection that I get to work with. And I also do a weekly study. I set aside every Tuesday morning, Tarot Tuesday, for, while I'm having my cup of tea, I do tarot study. And then I try to fit in tarot study, during the rest of the week as well. But I specifically set aside a time every week for tarot study. And I also just pull cards when I feel like I need them. And I'm a secular reader. I use tarot for things like introspection and, like I said, self-care, learning information about myself, getting some perspective. So I often pull cards when I need to kind of clarify my thinking on something, when my mind is spinning. I'll pull cards when I need to make a decision that I'm just really struggling to make. And I also will pull cards when I'm, really like weighing options. Maybe when I'm feeling fearful or anxious about something, those sort of tender moments or moments where we're not feeling fully empowered or fully ourselves. Essentially, I just pull cards when I need guidance. And for me, it often comes up as parts work. So let that be sort of the intro, the big overview of what I do with my tarot practice, but I would like to get into some more details. So if you're interested in those things, I will put timestamps below so you can kind of skip to the thing that means the most to you. And I'm going to cut away to some decks or showing you sort of examples of my practice. Honestly, the biggest part of my practice is my card of the year practice. Here you're seeing my card of the year altar. This year it is the Tower. And my card of the year practice starts with the card, and then I develop a theme of the year. It's a single word as my theme. From that card and that theme, I develop a monthly spread that I use to do a monthly reading. I will link a video down below where I go into a little more detail on this. I have also written up a guide if you're interested in that. I'll link that below as well. But basically every month I do the reading where I get some wisdom, I develop some mantras or words of power, and then I also have daily draw, nightly draw, and some crystals that I use to support the wisdom and the lessons from that month. My card of the year is a guide for intentional living, purposeful change, positive change in my life. Let me show you a little example of how I would do my daily draw, for example. And I want to be super clear about this. I don't actually do a daily draw. I call it my daily draw. But I get too rigid about things. I make too many rules for myself. So it's really important that in my tarot practice, I am willing to skip it if I don't need it, or skip it if I'm too busy, that sort of thing. So based on my monthly wisdom, based on my monthly reading, I developed some daily draw questions for myself. The Tower I'm pulling down this month is related to the Queen of Swords, so I might just ask for a message from the Queen of Swords, and it's usually just one card I would pull. Try to keep the daily draw really simple. I often don't journal about it. I just set the card on my desk to remember it throughout the day. I might ask myself a truth I need to hear or a truth I need to seek. And again, it would probably just be one card. How do I get out of my comfort zone? What zone do I need to push past? What do I need to confront? How can I confront? How can I connect my heart and mind? How can my head and heart guide me? So based on what I learned from my monthly reading, I have a whole month of daily draw questions I can pull from. Tarot is also my primary guide, support, and teacher when it comes to self-love and self-care. I've said before that I'm a secular tarot reader. I also consider myself to be a spiritual atheist. So I use things like the power of ritual and placebo to develop my spiritual practices. This is my self-love spell. and I work with it every week. You can see that tarot, I swap out cards. The High Priestess and the Empress, I swap them out using a new deck every week to refresh the altar. I read my boundaries, I read my spell, I work with a poppet, and I do a new tarot reading every week to give me some guidance on my self-love. My weekly self-love reading is often based on one of my boundaries that I've written up for myself. This needs to be rewritten, it's getting a little messy. Or I base it on my self-love affirmations that I have set up and I read every week. And sometimes I just ask for self-love wisdom, something to work on. In addition to this weekly practice, I just turn to tarot when I need self-care. I ask for advice about how to care for myself, live a balanced life, live a better life, live a life that is something that at the end of my life I can look back on and be happy with how I lived it. I'm going to give you an example of how I might use my personal boundaries as a way to access self-care or self-love. This week I give myself grace. That's going to be sort of my words of power for the week. So if my boundary is I give myself grace, for my weekly reading I might ask, how can I give myself grace? And then I just pull as many cards as seem to need to come out. And if I'm seeing this many pentacles, it's grace about, something in my real life. It might be grace about my home, my work, my money. Clearly need to dive deep and learn something about myself, right? But the idea is that I use these boundaries and then dive a little deeper into them, get some practical advice each week on how I can enact those things in my life. I also use my tarot practice for supporting my creativity. I consider myself to be an art witch, which means I use art as spell work. I also make little pocket altars. I've got a couple down here. I also have a creativity pocket altar. I do a weekly inner artist reading for myself to get lessons on my own creativity and working with my inner artist. I try to keep my inner artist reading really simple. I will just ask my deck, what does my inner artist need? And I pull one card because it's for the week. It can't be anything huge. It can be about my emotions. It can be about my relationship with my inner artist. It can be about, the actual output of what I'm making. So if this were my reading for the week, what does my inner artist need? With King of Cups, I would say some emotional balance. Maybe I've been feeling anxious about something and I need to work with my inner artist to get back to sort of a sense of, homeostasis emotionally. So when I need guidance or to clarify my thinking to help make a decision, I mentioned I often do parts work, and I want to show you what I mean by that. First of all, parts work is a therapeutic thing done by actual licensed therapists, and I am not one. But the work I have done with my therapists in the past that uses internal family systems and parts work has been so intensely powerful for me that I've taken that to my tarot practice. So what I mean is like working with a part of myself, my inner artist, my inner child, my inner mother, my inner manager, my inner rebel. And so I would ask something like a message of self-care from my inner rebel, get some information. I might ask for guidance from my inner defender, some guidance from my inner artist, guidance from my inner Queen of Cups. She's such a good nurturing card. Some guidance from my inner Queen of Swords for when I need to stand up for myself. Some guidance from my inner Fool, maybe, when I need to be a little bit rebellious in my life, right? So I ask these questions all the time, and it's usually just a couple cards, but incredibly powerful for me. When I'm having trouble moving forward or making a decision about something, I will often pull 3 cards. This is my favorite 3-card spread. Embrace this, release this, trust this. And it gets me out of my spinning thoughts and into being able to, embrace my own agency and make a decision about something. Embrace this, release this, trust this. I have been sharing my spreads. I've actually decided to make it a series, and I've been doing Tarot Spread Sunday. So sharing some of my spreads with you all, because a quick spread, especially when you're struggling and the mind is spinning, it just puts a little structure on it, and it seems to really help. When it comes to study, right now I am reading Radical Tarot, but I've got all sorts of books that I've either read or I've dipped into here and there or are on my to-be-read list. I've also created a little notebook for myself to work on the elements and the numerology. So I really like to try to get creative in my study and to build my own sort of guidebooks as I go. I also use this greeting cards box where I've got my spreads and notes about each of the cards to kind of track my learning. Tarot is a lifelong learning process, and it's one of the things I adore about it. I also have, guidebooks I can learn from. I've got you all out here on TarotTube. There are so many ways to continue learning when you read tarot. I also just try to keep my experience with my decks fresh. I have more decks than I could use in a week. And so I do bring some, a small mini collection up with me to my work desk every week. I'm very lucky to work from home, and so I can keep decks at my desk. And I just try to maybe do a little deep dive into that mini collection every week. And that's been really fun. It makes sure I'm pulling out decks that I haven't used in a while sometimes. Thank you so much, Tahan, for this video. It was really great to sort of think about my practice and to put it into words, and I've really loved seeing other people respond. Like if you liked this video, subscribe for more tarot content, and thanks for stopping by.